in this next room now for the next presentation that will be coming up. This presentation is by Alexander Arendt. He is from USLab, one of the German partners in the Dane project. Maybe he will introduce USLab a little bit himself. And his topic will be on the usability and artificial intelligence. USLab really took that part of the whole project to look at that aspect of AI, which is often underestimated, but still a very important topic to make sure that people can actually use the tools that we are providing to them. So, Alexander, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for the introduction. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming in, listening to our presentation on usability and artificial intelligence. Today, I'm going to introduce you to the basics of usability for medical devices, present the challenges that we are meeting when it comes to artificial intelligence with medical devices, and what we can do with interaction design to mitigate these challenges. Like Peter was so nice to introduce me, I'm Alexander Arendt. I'm a Master of Science in Human Factors, and I'm working at USLab as a project manager and a human factors engineer. And well, we are in this project to do what we always do as USLab and strive towards user-friendly and safe medical products and medical devices. So who are we? We are a pretty interdisciplinary and diverse team consisting of human factors experts, engineers, designers, clinicians, cognitive scientists, and also economists. And we have one mission. We want to aid development of medical devices that are tailored to their users with the overarching goal of increasing patient safety. As some of you may be aware, patient safety is majorly impacted by how people from the medical field, healthcare professionals and everybody else, patients, lay users, everybody who in some way interacts with medical devices, uses these devices. So usability makes sure that this can happen in a safe and effective manner. Our motto is those who fail earlier will reach their destination faster. In other words, when you incorporate users into the loop of medical device development, you learn what works for them and what does not. And this is what we say with fail, because sometimes you're designing something and then you let somebody use it and, well, you fail pretty hard, but then know what you can do better, what you can improve on. We as USLab only do this for medical devices, and of course usability and user experience is a broad field. And when it comes to geographical orientation, we really do this internationally. We do these projects like this, where it's in Germany and the Netherlands, but we've been to all kinds of places, aiding all kinds of people. Now, like I mentioned, we want to help our clients improve the usability of their medical devices. And when we look at the definition from the norm pertaining to the usability engineering of medical devices, which is the IEC 62366 -1 and -2, then it says there that usability is a characteristic of the user interface that facilitates use and thereby establishes effectiveness, efficiency, and user satisfaction in the intended use environment. Note especially the use environment. This is one of the critical points because the usability as a characteristic is not entirely positively phrased, because certain characteristics of the system can increase or decrease safety that is interacted with through the UI. You can take, for example, a syringe, pretty standard thing, have one here. You have a scale on there, and with the scale, you can determine how much of a certain solution did I inject or will I inject. But of course, you have to be able to read it where we come to the user environment. If this is not properly illuminated, then the UI element basically becomes moot. But usability is the aspect that leads to products actually being used in meaningful ways. Now, we can apply usability engineering to all sorts of medical devices. I've provided a pretty extensive list here. This is active medical devices and non-active medical devices, in vitro diagnostics, implants, combined products, products for home care and for rehabilitation, but it even goes as far as packaging, labeling, training material and manuals, all stuff that you wouldn't immediately put in the corner of UI elements, user interface elements. This is where we've been building up a lot of expertise in the last years. In the past, especially the labeling, packaging, and manuals have been mere afterthoughts, but in recent years, it attracted more and more attention. Now, of course, nowadays, and especially in the last 30 to 35 years, there's been more and more devices that heavily rely on software to be effective. And we've worked with software before, of course, but within the 𝐷AIM project, we've encountered a software that differs inherently from traditional software. And this is where artificial intelligence comes into place, because it deviates in a certain way from everything we've worked before, whereas in the past, software has been a fixed characteristic of the system. With an AI, and especially with a program like News, where you can train continually, this is not a fixed characteristic anymore, and we are met with individual challenges and challenges specific to these kinds of softwares. Now, if we recall the definition of usability, it's described as a characteristic, and when the characteristics change over time, like they possibly can with trainable systems, then this affects usability to a certain degree. And I'd like to introduce you to components of the usability of AI-aided medical devices and what interaction design can do to maintain the same level of usability, even with a system that changes its characteristics over time. Now, during the 𝐷AIM project, one of our first activities as UseLab was a user needs analysis, where we went out and talked to professionals from the fields of radiology and physical medicine, and find out, well, when it comes to automation and when it comes to AI, what do you even need? And we went into the workflows and just spent a whole day there, had a look at how do these people work right now, and what emerges as as a user need from these observations that we did there. And one thing that really emerged as a common and important aspect of interaction with automatic imaging evaluation systems, I think 𝐃𝐀𝐿 also talked about that, then this is trust. So these potential users, radiologists, radiotherapists, radiological assistants, what have you, they all agreed they would need to trust such an algorithm that's supposed to aid them in their work so that they would rely on it. Now, in the following, I will just, for the sake of convenience, refer to the algorithm as News, because this has been what we've used internally, and this is the name of the software that's been further developed in the medical direction within the 𝐷AIM project. And when we look at News, which is a deep neuronal network technology, then we can safely say that it is in fact an automation, because it is, as an AI, supposed to overtake a task that formerly a human would have done. Now, the term trust in automation was coined in cognitive psychology and human factors especially, and it describes the internal attitude of people to show themselves vulnerable with regards to the actions of an automation, all in all based on the expectation that the automation will fulfill a task that the person finds important, but where the person loses the possibility to monitor the task or control the fulfillment of the task. And I want to stress here that trust is merely the internal attitude, and from my research, I've seen that what matters more to interaction design is not how people feel, but how they behave when they are confronted with such a system. And the behavior that's associated with trusting a system, or, well, automatic systems and any other system really, is reliance. And users that rely on a system, when you ask them, they usually report that they trust it, but it's not always the other way around. So there are people who say, well, I trust this system, but then you look at their behavior working with the system and you see that they do not appropriately rely on the system that's supposed to help them. And when I say appropriately, this is another important aspect. Reliance can go down two sides. We can have appropriate reliance, or we can have inappropriate reliance. So users can rely too much and say accept wrong results from a system like news, or they could rely too little and in the worst case stop using the system altogether, whereby it loses all its relevance, completely wiping out any advantages that it might have had on their work. So the question really is, how do we elicit appropriate reliance behavior? Before I go more into detail how to elicit this behavior, I'd like to introduce some more concepts from this field. It's pretty self-explanatory that users of an automation are satisfied with what they see when each and every time when they use the system, they see this automation, it worked correctly and it worked accurately. And this property, what the user of a system sees, is the perceived reliability. Like I wrote here, I see it's working. And this is something that we as interaction designers can communicate. We have an immediate influence on this property even, because the system can communicate to its users how reliably it actually is. Think, for example, of a progress bar for showing the training progress of an algorithm such as news, or of algorithms that are made with news. And perceived reliability goes hand in hand with another aspect of a system. This is the actual reliability. And for example, for news, where you as a user put in your knowledge, your pattern recognition, the actual reliability is the performance that you as a user do when training the algorithm. So when they train the algorithm well, the algorithm becomes reliable. Now, reliance behavior typically changes over time. It all starts with certain assumptions of a new system. As a user, I learn about a new system. I hear of its capabilities and I form certain expectations, certain assumptions. This is one of the first steps to build trust, and this lays the groundwork for appropriate reliance. Now, these assumptions then can become internal attitudes. Like I said, trust would be one of those internal attitudes, and these form the basis for intentions. So intentional actions, like intentionally relying on an algorithm's performance. Now, when we come to concrete solutions that we can apply to shape assumptions, we have the powerful tool of training people. This is pretty self-explanatory too, but it can be brought to mind because training users is a feasible strategy to shape assumptions before any interaction with the system really took place, and it really helps. Now, in the case of news, we could, for example, tell users that the actual reliability of the system corresponds to the quality of training they do with the algorithm. So they have an assumption about this. Or a second important point for user training is teaching them that these deep learning algorithms cannot explain how they came to their results. And well, at first it sounds problematic that you say, okay, the system cannot explain how it came to its results, because the main critique of what we heard from users is that with current automatic imaging evaluation tools, they feel as though they are working with a black box. So they requested a transparent system that explains how it came to its conclusions. But unfortunately, this is not as possible with deep neural networks as it may be with other software solutions. Firstly, because transparency is not viable, because not even developers really know how exactly the algorithm worked. It is also not viable to present to the users of an AI-aided imaging evaluation technique how it worked on a network level, because they are not experts from this field, they are experts from medical imaging. This may be suitable for regulatory purposes. To bring a system to market, you'd have to show to a notified body, well, how does this work? But for interaction design, this has no value. And deep neural networks can only poorly explain the results, as one person would to another. Ludo touched on this in his presentation. And of course, it helps such professionals to see areas marked in the scans. Where did the system lay its eyes on, so to speak? But the real justification that you have when you talk to another person about why they did something the way they did, that's missing here. But, well, fortunately, there is a solution, there's a light at the horizon, because to tackle this challenge, there's a team of researchers, Mulligan, Klutz, and Coley, who have just recently introduced the notion of contestability, and that is that users can object to a result and then either correct it or confirm it. As an example, think of how we as, or well, at least me as a very frequent user of Microsoft Word deal with the spell check feature. I see it's there, it's marked. I don't really know how it generated its result, but I can interact with it. I can say, that's intentional that I wrote this way, I ignore it. I can even say to Word, oh, this is a correct word, and teach it that this word will not be marked in the future. Or I can confirm it and say, you're right, thank you. And this brings some advantages that you don't have with classical explainability, because as long as a system stays contestable, the user can critically engage with the system, and this could possibly improve the reliance behavior in the future by keeping them in the loop, not through explanation, but through collaboration. And by staying in this loop of decision making and algorithm training, it may become less important for the user to understand how it worked exactly on a software level, because they feel engaged in a certain way. Also, from an interaction design point of view, when I talked about perceived reliability, this is updated each and every time when the user interacts in this contesting way with the system, because they collaborate with the system in a critical way. And thereby, it forms their reliance behavior, so the user's reliance behavior, through ongoing interaction. And finally, this could remove some frustration that users have with current automated imaging analysis solutions that do not continue to learn when you use them. And what we've heard during our analyses is users have to correct so much that they feel there's no advantage in using these computer-aided diagnostic or computer-aided detection algorithms. With an algorithm like 𝐻𝐽, this correction work actually bears fruit and could potentially not be as frustrating. Now, this brings me to the end of this presentation. I think there's 5 takeaway points for designing interaction with AI-aided medical imaging evaluation software. First of all, we can conclude that artificial intelligence does pose a challenge of variable system characteristics. This is from interaction design point of view, but this is also from a regulatory point of view, because FDA and CE alike at the moment do not accept software that can change. They want to have a fixed system characteristic. The second takeaway is that user behavior is more important than self-reported trust or what the users say, and we want reliance, appropriate reliance, which is the third takeaway. We as interaction designers should strive to elicit appropriate reliance behaviors in the users of our systems. The fourth takeaway for me is we need to shape the assumption of users, for example, through training, so we can then communicate in the fifth takeaway the extra reliability of an automation's users and keep the users in the loop with contestable results by making the deep learning algorithm more of a partner to collaborate with. Okay, I'm at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for taking your time to follow this webinar today. I hope you could take away something for your own work and, well, if not, gained interesting insights into the world of interaction design. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Very interesting presentation. Are there any questions from the audience? There's nothing in the chat yet. So put it in the chat if you have questions. Alexander, one of the things you mentioned in the last slide is that you said you have to shape the assumption of the user.
Yeah.
How can you shape that assumption? So it's about the assumption that they have over performance of a tool, or what? And how are you going to make sure that you shape that in the right way? What would be tricks?
I think that varies from product to product, really. But what I mean when I say shape assumptions is make sure during training or during product presentation, before users work with the system, that you tell them what to expect, basically. And well, in the case of something like news, this would basically, for me, be the main point. This system is only as good as you make it to be, or this system is only as good as you train it to be.
Okay, thank you.
Does this make sense?
Yes, it does. It does.
There's a question from Yannis. How do you think the knowledge from this project will be useful for designing future AI products from a usability perspective? I think we'll see. I can't really say yet.
Of course, we have some from the project. We will have some materials that are available and will be made available after the project has been finished about how to perform these kind of things. And at least I think one of the things that we have to make sure of is that we create the awareness that the usability aspect is one of the important things that we have to look into. It's not just about making the technology work. It's also making the human user work with the technology. So I think that's one of the important things. There is a question from Johannes also, and he is asking, I'm wondering, how does contestability translate to model improvement? When a prediction is being contested, is the model expected to adapt itself?
Yes, this is the idea. And like I said, from a regulatory point of view, this is very challenging, but I spared this aspect deliberately from this presentation. But yes, so the contestation should shape the model further. There's a question by Kiki. Have you assessed any currently implemented AI solutions, and how do you assess the usability of these systems? Let's see, I have to think. So me personally, I didn't assess any currently implemented AI solutions in my daily work now. This is still pretty fresh, and we didn't get the opportunity yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course, we will be doing some testing over the summer,
right?
Within the DAME project still. So the project is not over yet. So we will be doing some additional testing at different sites by UseLab of the news environment. And maybe, Kiki, it's something interesting to look into as a future project possibility. So combining the efforts and seeing how we could do the usability tests of already existing products might be a very interesting topic to research further. If there are no, Kiki says definitely, Alexander, so you should keep in contact. Okay, I would like to thank you again, Alexander. It was very interesting to also hear something about this aspect of the DAME project. And to everybody who's attending, we will be having a short break again of about 15 to 20 minutes. And at 3:45, we will continue with the two final presentations. In the break, you can go into the carousel again to have a meeting with different people for 5 minutes per meeting. And we will see you all back in the rooms for the presentations. So like I said, at 3:45, we have the next one in the program.